The storm had come early that year. A sharp wind rolled down from the Wind River Range, carrying needles of ice that sliced across the high plains. The herd of wild mustangs, 23 strong, pressed forward through the drifts, heads low, hooves crunching against the hard-packed snow. Their breath hung in clouds that vanished into the storm. Among them was a mare named Lark, dark bay with a white blaze across her nose. She was heavy with milk, and by her side stumbled her newborn foal, barely 2 days old. The colt's legs trembled with each step, thin as fence posts, his coat still rough from birth. He had no name, no strength, only instinct. When the wind howled, Lark stopped and turned, nuzzling her foal's flank, urging him to move. The herd's lead stallion, a scarred dun called Arrow, pushed them onward. The storm was worsening, and in the high country, hesitation could mean death. They were heading toward lower ground, a shallow valley where sagebrush poked through the snow, offering some shelter. But visibility was fading fast. The mares began to clump together, their tails plastered to their legs, while the foal lagged behind. His mother turned again and again, neighing softly, but the distance between them widened with each gust. Then came the moment that sealed his fate. A sudden downburst of wind hit from the north. Lark stopped, blinded, her mane whipping across her eyes. When the gust passed, the foal was gone, swallowed by the white. He called out with a thin, wavering whinny. The herd's sound disappeared under the storm's roar. Panic flickered through the foal's small heart, and he tried to follow the scent of his mother. But the wind carried it away. He wandered, head low, searching for warmth in a world that had none. Snow gathered on his back. His tiny nostrils froze, and when his legs gave out, he fell, a fragile shape in the drifts, breathing shallowly. Night came early that day. The storm deepened into silence, the kind that only snow can make. Hours passed. Coyotes barked in the distance. Ravens circled once, then moved on. By midnight, the foal's heart slowed. The stars above him blurred behind thin clouds. He was alone, or so it seemed. A dark figure appeared from the northern ridge, an old gray wolf, limping slightly as he moved across the snow. His coat was ragged, flecked with white around the muzzle and ears. His name, if wolves could have one, might have been Ghostpaw, for he'd been seen only rarely in recent years, a survivor of many winters. The wolf had followed the scent of blood and milk, faint but distinct, that led him down from the foothills. He hadn't eaten in 3 days. His ribs pressed against his skin, and hunger made his head heavy. When he came upon the foal, he stopped. There it was, a young, motionless body half buried in snow. Easy prey. No herd nearby. The smell of life still clung to it, faint but real. He stepped closer, one careful paw at a time. His breath steamed from his nostrils, curling over the foal's flank. The foal stirred weakly, a shallow shiver. Ghostpaw's lips twitched. His instincts urged him to finish it quickly. A newborn was food, nothing more. Nature's law was simple and merciless. He lowered his head. His teeth brushed the foal's mane, and then something small, wordless, made him pause. The foal opened its eyes. Large, dark, and clouded by cold, they met his. No fight, no fear, only confusion, faint trust, perhaps born from a newborn's blindness to danger. The wolf blinked. He lifted his head, ears twitching to the wind. The herd's trail had vanished hours ago. There were no threats nearby, no rivals, no coyotes bold enough to steal from him. He was alone with the foal and the snow. For a long moment, the wolf stood there, staring down at the fragile creature. Then, instead of the killing lunge, he did something no observer could have predicted. He circled once, then lay down beside the foal. The warmth from his body seeped into the small horse's side. The foal shifted, instinctively seeking heat, and pressed against the wolf's chest. Ghostpaw remained still, his eyes half closed. He could feel the faint heartbeat against his ribs. Outside, the storm raged on, covering them both in a soft white shroud. By dawn, only a small rise in the snow showed where the two bodies lay, predator and prey, huddled together against the cold. When the sun rose, the storm was over. The land stretched quiet and clean, unmarred except for a single trail of wolf prints leading to that spot, and none leading away. When dawn broke over the plains, the storm's silence was absolute. The air was brittle, sharp enough to sting the lungs. Beneath the crust of snow, life still breathed, slow and fragile. The wolf stirred first. His fur was rimed with ice, his muzzle dusted white. For a moment he did not move, unsure if he was still alive. Then, with a grunt, he lifted his head and shook himself free of the snow. The foal lay beside him, shivering faintly. Its breath was shallow but steady. Ghostpaw blinked against the sunlight, his yellow eyes narrow slits. He had survived another night, but hunger gnawed deep within him. His body trembled from exhaustion. A lesser wolf might have given in to instinct, ended this brief alliance with a bite, but something old and tangled stirred inside him. He had once belonged to a pack. Years ago, when his coat had been silver instead of gray, he had led a small band through this same country, 6 wolves, strong and lean. Together they hunted elk and antelope, following the herds with the seasons. He'd had a mate then, a black she-wolf with eyes like amber. She had been the heart of the pack. When she disappeared one winter, taken by a trap or sickness, everything changed. The others scattered. Ghostpaw was left with the snow and the silence. He became a shadow, living on scraps, watching the young wolves take his territory piece by piece. Now, standing over the foal, he felt something strange. A tug. A reminder of the old days, of the nights when he would curl around the pups to keep them warm. The foal stirred again, kicking weakly. Its thin whimper broke through his thoughts. Ghostpaw stepped back, uncertain. The young one couldn't stand. Its legs were stiff from cold. Hunger would take it soon if he didn't act, one way or another. He paced in a small circle, torn between need and memory. Finally, he did something no predator was supposed to do. He lowered his muzzle and began licking the snow from the foal's face. The salt of the animal's skin filled his mouth, warm, living. The foal blinked, weak but aware, and turned its head toward him. The wind picked up, scattering light across the plains. Far off, a raven cried. By midday, the sun softened the snow's surface, and Ghostpaw led the foal, slowly, awkwardly, toward a line of juniper bushes that broke the wind. The foal stumbled often, but it followed the wolf's shape as if guided by instinct. They reached a hollow at the base of a rock outcrop. Ghostpaw sniffed the air carefully. No coyotes, no other wolves, no scent of man. Satisfied, he settled near the entrance and curled around himself. The foal collapsed beside him. For the rest of that day, the plains stayed quiet. From a nearby ridge, a pair of ravens watched them, sharp-eyed witnesses to the strange pairing below. Later, a red fox passed at a distance, stopping briefly to study the odd pair before trotting on. Night fell again. The foal, now able to stand for brief moments, nuzzled the wolf's flank. Its stomach growled with hunger. There was no milk to give. Ghostpaw looked out across the snowfields, knowing the nearest herd was miles away. Something had to change soon. By instinct, the old wolf rose and began to hunt. He ranged out under the stars, silent as mist, leaving the foal hidden beneath the junipers. His limp slowed him, but his senses were sharp. The cold air carried every sound, the skitter of mice under the crust, the faint scurry of a hare. Hours passed before he caught one, a snowshoe hare startled from its burrow. The chase was brief, clumsy, but successful. When he returned, blood darkened the fur around his muzzle. He dropped the kill beside the foal. The young horse sniffed it and turned away, not understanding. So Ghostpaw tore the hare open and nudged a piece toward it. The foal didn't eat, but it licked at the blood in the snow, drawn by the taste of salt and water. It was enough. That night, the wolf curled close again. Above them, the stars glittered with pitiless beauty. The wind moaned across the ridge. Days passed this way, a fragile balance of survival. The foal gained strength, its legs less shaky, though still too young to fend for itself. Ghostpaw's limp worsened, but his eyes stayed clear, alert. He hunted small game, bringing pieces back to the hollow. Once a coyote pack approached, drawn by scent. Ghostpaw drove them off with a ferocity that seemed to surprise even him. When it was over, he returned to find the foal trembling, eyes wide. He stood guard until it slept again. A week later, the weather began to shift. The snow melted in patches, revealing tough grass beneath. Ghostpaw watched the horizon often now, perhaps sensing that his time near the foal was ending. The Mustang herd had passed through this way again. He could smell them, faint, distant. The foal perked its ears at the scent, something deep in its blood calling it home. That evening, as the light faded, Ghostpaw led it partway down the ridge. He paused at a stream's edge, watching as the foal drank, weak but steady. He did not know why he had spared it, or why he had stayed. There were no words for such things in a wolf's mind, only echoes of instincts that no longer fit cleanly into the laws of survival. When the night came, he lifted his head to the moon and howled. It wasn't a hunting cry nor a call for his lost pack. It was something else, softer, lonelier, older. The foal raised its head, listening. In the stillness that followed, two lives, predator and prey, stood together under the wide Wyoming sky. Spring was still weeks away, but the edge of winter had softened. The days grew longer, the light less cruel. Snow melted in streaks across the foothills, feeding trickles of water that ran down into the sage valleys. Ghostpaw stayed near the foal. He hunted just enough to keep them alive. Voles, a wounded hare, once even the frozen carcass of a pronghorn left behind by coyotes. The foal refused meat but nibbled at whatever patches of grass he could find. Each day his legs grew steadier, his coat thicker. If a human had seen them, they would have thought the sight impossible. An old gray wolf and a young wild horse moving together across the plain. Not as hunter and hunted, but as something else entirely. They left tracks that baffled even the ravens. Parallel lines, hoof prints and paw prints side by side. Ghostpaw no longer guarded the foal because of hunger or confusion. Some deeper rhythm had taken hold. A duty, perhaps, though he couldn't have named it. His instincts warred silently with themselves, yet each night he returned to lie down near the foal, facing the wind, watching the horizon. From a distance, life was beginning to stir again. A pair of biologists from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had been tracking wolf movements through this part of Wyoming. They had trail cameras set near the upper ridges to monitor reintroduced packs, and one of those cameras had captured something puzzling, a single old wolf traveling with what looked like a foal. The footage was grainy, taken through falling snow, but clear enough to show them walking side by side. At first, the scientists assumed a camera glitch, double exposure maybe, but when a second camera picked up similar images 2 days later, curiosity turned to astonishment. Dr. Lena Cortez, who led the project, studied the images again and again. "He's not chasing it," she murmured to her field assistant. "He's escorting it." The story spread quietly among the small team. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Perhaps the wolf was too weak to attack. Others wondered if it hinted at something they didn't yet understand about animal behavior. While they debated, life continued out on the plain. The foal was growing fast. He could now walk without stumbling, though his ribs still showed through his rough coat. Ghostpaw's limp had worsened, arthritis maybe, or an old injury aggravated by the cold, but his eyes stayed sharp. One morning, the foal ventured farther from their hollow than usual. He trotted toward a patch of new grass sprouting near a meltwater creek. Ghostpaw followed slowly, nose low, ears turning at every sound. That was when the coyotes returned. 4 of them, lean and desperate after a hard winter, came slipping down from the ridge. Their eyes glinted with hunger, their tails low. They fanned out, circling the foal. Ghostpaw reacted instantly. A growl tore from his throat. Low, rough, the sound of an old warrior unwilling to yield. He lunged, teeth bared, fur bristling. The coyotes hesitated. They knew him. The legend of the old wolf still carried weight in these parts. But hunger made them bold. One darted in, snapping at his flank. Ghostpaw turned, caught it by the shoulder, and shook hard. The coyote yelped and fled. The others retreated a few paces, whining, tails tucked. It was enough. The foal bolted clumsily back toward the hollow. Ghost Paw limped after him, panting, his breath ragged. When they were safe, he sank down in the snow. His front paw bled from a shallow bite, and his chest heaved. The foal stood nearby, trembling but unharmed. For the first time since the storm, Ghost Paw looked truly tired. His body had carried him farther than it should have. He lay still, eyes half closed, while the foal hovered near his shoulder. Hours passed. The wind shifted again, bringing new scents. The musk of horses, faint but unmistakable. The Mustang herd had returned. The foal lifted his head, nostrils flaring. He recognized them instantly. The call of blood, the sound of hooves echoing faintly over the hills. He whinnied, a high, bright sound that carried through the air. From somewhere far off came an answering call. Ghost Paw stirred. His eyes opened, and for a moment he looked toward the sound too. The foal pranced in place, torn between two worlds, the wild herd and the quiet hollow where the wolf had kept him alive. By evening, the sound of the herd grew louder. Lark, the foal's mother, was among them, her nostrils wide, her eyes scanning the plains. She had never stopped searching. When she caught his scent, she called again, louder this time. The foal answered, voice shaking. Ghost Paw rose with effort. He nudged the foal forward, a gesture as ancient as it was final. The foal hesitated only a moment before trotting away toward the sound of his kind. He looked back once. The old wolf stood alone in the fading light, the snow pink around his paws. Their eyes met, predator and prey, bound for a heartbeat by something older than fear. Then the foal turned and ran to his mother. The herd accepted him with snorts and nickers, encircling him in warmth. Lark pressed her muzzle against his neck, trembling. When she looked toward the ridge again, the wolf was gone. Only paw prints remained, leading north, back into the wild. For 2 more nights, Ghost Paw traveled slowly, following no scent but his own. His strength waned. The coyotes trailed him from a distance but never dared to close in. He reached a frozen creek beneath the shadow of the Wind River Range and lay down beneath a cottonwood. The stars flickered overhead. He rested his head on his paws. The last thing he heard was the faint echo of hooves, distant, free. By dawn, the snow had covered him. Weeks later, the biologists found the trail camera evidence of both animals, the foal reunited with the herd, the wolf's tracks ending near the creek. Dr. Cortez stood over the prints and whispered, "He didn't kill it, he kept it alive." Her assistant shook his head. Why would he? She had no answer. In her field notes, she wrote, "Behavior inconsistent with predation. Subject, wolf, displayed apparent protective tendencies toward juvenile prey species. Possible imprinting, misdirected paternal instinct, or neurochemical anomaly, but no clear precedent." The report would be filed, peer-reviewed, and debated. But even among scientists, some mysteries resist dissection. Out on the plains, the spring grass was growing again. And somewhere among the herd, a young Mustang colt ran, his coat dark, his eyes bright, and his spirit marked by the memory of an old gray wolf. By late spring, the plains of Wyoming were unrecognizable. Where months before there had been only snow and silence, now the grass grew high and green. Meadowlarks trilled from the fence lines, and herds of antelope grazed where the drifts had once been chest deep. The Mustangs returned to the open valleys, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. Among them ran the foal, stronger now, taller, his chest broadening with each passing week. The scars of winter had faded, but something in his eyes remained wild, older than his months. He no longer strayed far from his mother, Lark, yet there were moments when he lifted his head and looked north toward the ridges and the snow-capped peaks. Sometimes he stopped grazing and stood still, ears twitching, as if waiting for a sound only he could hear. The old wolf was gone, but his memory lingered, not in legend yet, but in small, unspoken ways. 1. The Scientists. 2 months after the last sighting, Dr. Lena Cortez returned to the field site with a small research team. The snow had melted completely now, and the earth smelled of sage and thaw. They carried GPS receivers and cameras, intent on following the final trail where the wolf's prints had ended. At the creek, they found what they had expected: bones, scattered by scavengers, the skull half buried under driftwood. The teeth were worn down, the jaw slightly twisted, signs of age. Cortez knelt beside them quietly. "It's him," she said. The others stood in silence. Beside the skull lay something unexpected, a few strands of coarse reddish-brown hair caught in the brush. Horsehair. The team exchanged glances. Her assistant crouched down. "So they were here together." Cortez nodded slowly. "Right up until the end, maybe." They documented everything, samples, photographs, notes. But even as she wrote, Cortez knew the data would never capture what had truly happened. There was no graph or equation to measure mercy. Later, when she published her field report, she chose her words carefully. "This case illustrates a behavioral anomaly in an aging male Canis lupus, gray wolf. Subject's protective behavior toward a juvenile Equus fiercest cabalus, wild horse, challenges conventional predatory models. The most plausible explanations include social disorientation from pack loss, residual parental instinct, or species-specific misrecognition under stress conditions. Further observation required." It was scientific, precise, and hollow. She added one final note in handwriting along the margin, never meant for publication. "Sometimes survival is not the only law of nature." 2. The locals. By summer, word of the incident had spread far beyond the scientific community. Ranchers who lived along the Red Butte foothills started telling their own versions. One man swore he'd seen the pair from a distance through his binoculars, wolf and colt, plain as day. Another said he'd found the wolf's body near the creek before the scientists came, and that he'd covered it with stones so the coyotes wouldn't shame him. Stories grew with the telling. Some called it proof that the old spirits of the land still watched over the wild things. Others said the wolf had been too weak to kill, and that the foal had simply been lucky. But for those who had lived their lives close to the rhythms of this country, who had seen the thin line between predator and prey blurred by hunger and weather, the tale carried weight. In local diners and feed stores, it became known as the Vigil of the Wolf. 3. The foal. The Mustang colt, now nearly a year old, grew into a fine young stallion. Arrow, the lead stallion, tolerated him at first, and later began to challenge him as rivals do. The colt held his own. He had no name, of course, but the researchers who tracked the herd tagged him with an identifier, M47. They noted his unusual behavior, unafraid of wolves, cautious, yet curious around their scent. When the pack howled at night in the far hills, M47 often lifted his head and listened rather than bolting. Cortez, on one of her later field visits, spotted him through a scope. "That's the one," she murmured. He was running at full stride, mane whipping like fire, every movement filled with the kind of strength only the wild can grant. She lowered her binoculars, smiling faintly. "He made it." Her assistant, younger and more pragmatic, asked, "You really think he remembers the wolf?" Cortez didn't answer right away. The wind carried the scent of grass and dust, the endless quiet of the plains. "I think memory isn't just in the mind," she said at last. "It's in the way we move, the way we survive. He carries that wolf in him, whether he knows it or not." 4. The land remembers. As years passed, the story slipped into half-truth and folklore. A trail camera near the same creek captured a new generation of wolves, descendants of distant packs. One evening, a young gray male paused at that very spot where the old one had died. He sniffed the ground, circled once, and sat for a long time before moving on. There was no logic to it, only the quiet pulse of something ancient repeating itself. Nature forgets names but not patterns. The land that had witnessed mercy once would do so again, in some form, in another season. The plains rolled on, indifferent and eternal, their beauty born from both life and death. That autumn, as the herds moved south again, M47, now nearly full-grown, led a small group of younger mares along the foothills. The wind rose around them, cold and clean. Snow began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. For a moment, as flakes gathered on his mane, he stopped and turned north. There, Through the blur of snow, the ridges loomed, the same ridges where an old wolf had once walked beside him. He stood still, nostrils flaring, eyes bright with something he could not name. Then he gave a short, low whinny, a sound the wind carried into the emptiness. And somewhere far away in the vastness of the plains, a lone wolf's answering howl seemed to rise on the wind. Whether real or imagined, no one could say. But those who heard it, ranchers, rangers, travelers on the back roads, all told the same story later. For one heartbeat, it was like the land itself remembered.